Welcome to Hockey Central at Home. I'm Carolyn Cameron, and this week we're doing things a little differently. Frankly, we're not going to talk much about hockey because honestly, right now, that's not what's important. What we are going to do is talk, but mostly listen to our guest, and that this week is Sarah Nurse. Sarah, thanks for joining me.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So with the police violence that we've seen south of the border, with the protests and the response that really we've seen worldwide, for you personally, how are you feeling?
It's definitely been a heavy last couple of weeks. Things have been very difficult. Obviously, not only are we dealing with a global pandemic, this huge issue of racism has kind of come to the head. So there have been a lot of emotions. There have been exhaustion, there's frustration, there's anger, there's sadness, there's even guilt. And I think that us as Canadians, we often separate ourselves from what's happening in the United States. And I think that as Canadians, we need to realize that that's very wrong. There are many instances of unarmed Black, Brown, Indigenous people being, killed by the police. Racism exists in Canada. I don't mean to give a history lesson or anything, but I even think of Viola Desmond, who is on the $10 bill. And she was, a civil rights activist. She was one who really, Viola Desmond was somebody who, sorry.
That's okay.
It's really tough for me to talk about.
No worries.
Yeah. Viola Desmond, she's on our $10 bill, and she's a woman who refused to leave a white-only movie theater. And people call her Canada's Rosa Parks. And we have to realize how wrong that is, because not only did that happen 9 years before Rosa Parks actually sat on that bus, we have to realize that what Viola did was just as important as what Rosa did in the United States. And I think that we often take that for granted. We really suppress our Black history, and I think that we need to really realize that and grow from it.
So for you personally, what was your first memory or realization of racism?
For me, I've always had kind of a unique lens into racism, because obviously being a biracial person, a biracial child, I have lighter skin. And so I've been, I've experienced racism, I've seen it, I've heard it, but I've also been afforded white privilege. And I've also seen how the Black community is treated in regards to the white community. And it's been difficult. Obviously, my dad, he's a history teacher, and he's taught me about Black history growing up. And it's sad that so many people have turned blind eyes, and it's taken kind of this horrific murder of George Floyd to get the world listening.
You shared a story on your Instagram too. You posted a picture of you and your dad when you were younger. Would you mind retelling that story for people who didn't see it?
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, it wasn't that long ago, I was in a grocery store with my dad, and we were making separate purchases. So he went through the checkout line before I did. And I watched kind of as we were waiting in line, without even really realizing, but the cashier she was cheerful. She was so nice. She was bubbly to everybody going through. And as soon as my dad walked up, I kind of saw the look that she gave him, and she kind of tightened up and really didn't acknowledge that he was even there. He greeted her, he said hello, he went through everything, he paid. She didn't say a word. She didn't really even look in his direction after that. And then as soon as he was done and had gone through, she looked at me and just like perked up, just like she had been before. And that was something that day that I realized really white privilege. And I realized that because of the color of my skin and the pigment, I go through life a little bit easier than he does. And that's so crazy, because it's a pigment in our skin. My dad is a great guy. And, I'll be the first one to say that. And it's crazy that people can just look at him without even knowing him and judge him and treat him a certain way.
And those are the microaggressions that you just see in day-to-day life. But how have you also experienced it in hockey over your career?
Absolutely. I think with hockey, it's always been a little bit difficult, because my career and me growing up playing hockey, I've always been under this microscope, and I've always been questioned on why I am a hockey player. Obviously, growing up, I was a female hockey player, and I was playing in a male-dominated sport. I played with the boys. And then being a biracial child, they're wondering why I'm playing hockey. I've been told, you should really straighten your hair, which is something that I've been doing for like over a decade now because I wanted to fit in with my hockey community. I've been asked why I don't play basketball. Somebody has come up to me and blatantly said, I will just never understand why, people like you play hockey. And it's crazy because I look at Black kids and Indigenous kids, and unless they're excelling at hockey, unless they're good at hockey, they're not afforded any respect. For me, when I walked into an arena with my dad, people looked at us and there was no respect. I wasn't allowed to play hockey just because I loved the game and because I was passionate. I had to be good at it or else there wasn't a place for me and I didn't really belong.
Well, and you have this platform and you've used your voice throughout your career, whether it's for inequality or representation for women, whether it is those microaggressions or the racial bias. How does that feel, having that platform to use that voice? Is it empowering? Does it put pressure on you? How does it make you feel?
I think I use my platform, and I see my platform as a responsibility, but also as a privilege that I take a lot of pride in. With my friends and my family, I'm kind of the voice of reason, and I like think of myself as the rational one. And from a very young age, my opinion has been heard and it's been taken seriously. And so I realized that I have this platform and I want to do something with it. I want my voice to be heard when I don't think things are right. I've grown up and people have told me, life just isn't fair. And I've always questioned, well, why not? Why can't we have equality? Why can't we have equal opportunity? Why are certain groups of people, I guess, regarded as higher than other groups? As a female hockey player, as a female professional athlete, and as a female in general, I know what it's like to be silenced. I know what it's like for people to turn a blind eye. I know what it's like for people to literally look at you and say that they don't care about you. And so there's so many parallels that I can draw between all the things that I speak up on. And it's just about equality. It's just about realizing that we as human beings are all created equal, and that's how we should be treated.
Well, and you mentioned too, with all this talk, whether it's social media or like this in interviews, that you have a wide range of emotions. And one of them that you mentioned earlier was guilt. What did you mean by that?
I think guilty, just in the sense that for so long this has been going on, and it's not new in any sense of the imagination. Racism is going on for hundreds of years throughout North America and in Canada, and it's something that has been able to have a blind eye turn to it, and it's something that we haven't had to face, and it's something that people, non-Black people, are able to turn off. And for me, myself, I don't have to fear leaving my house, but I look at my dad, and when he leaves the house, it's like, man, crazy things can happen out there. And so there's definitely a little bit of that guilt that I feel that we haven't stood up for our Black family.
Well, and we all need to stand up for each other. And that's the question now, is what is the best way to make change? From your perspective, what's the answer?
Mm-hmm. I think right now, obviously, there is that education and there's the listening. We've heard Akeem Aliu and Evander Kane speak up and really be advocates in these last couple of weeks, in these last couple of months. And so it's definitely just listening, educating yourself, taking it upon yourself. It's not any Black person's, responsibility to educate you. You really have to take that upon yourself and examine your belief systems and your own biases and really get information for yourself. I look at the statements being made, obviously the non-Black players in the NHL who've stood up and, expressed solidarity and ultimately in support and committing themselves to wanting to change and helping to change the culture. And I think that's amazing. I look at Hockey Canada, the NHL, they've also issued statements, and I think it's great that they've acknowledged it. But, for lack of a better term, I think it's really time to put their money where their mouth is and really implement true strategies. Hire Black people. They're just as educated, they're just as passionate, and they are just as qualified When you do your games, that you're celebrating different groups, whether it's the LGBTQ, whether it's your Black community, whether it's the Indigenous community, don't have slip-ups. Don't mess up those games. Don't just celebrate the Black community in February. We need to create a space in the hockey community that is inclusive for all and that makes everybody feel welcome.
Well, one of the phrases that I've heard a lot over the past week and a half is the worst thing that you can say is nothing. And that being said, it's one thing to say something, but it's another thing to actually turn it into action. Before we let you go, are there any final thoughts or anything else that you wanted to add?
No, I think that it's just ultimately about making, especially our little hockey world here in Canada, like making it an inclusive space and making everybody feel welcome. I want to see people of color, people of different races in hockey arenas. To this day, when I finish up a game and I leave a dressing room and I go out to greet, my parents, the fans, I can spot my dad without even trying in less than 3 seconds because he's the only Black man in the entire place. And I want that to change because I want more people to feel comfortable and I want them ultimately to share and to want to play the sport that we all love here.
Well, Sarah, we can change and we need to change. And I can't thank you enough for taking the time and continuing to use your voice. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's Sarah Nurse, everyone. As she said, it's not just her responsibility to educate you. We all need to educate ourselves. And I encourage you to do that in the days, months, and years ahead. Thanks, everyone, for watching another edition of Hockey Central at Home.